Tim Burton, one of the world's most acclaimed directors, voted the 26th and sexiest male by Phoenix magazine, an Academy Award-winning Golden Globe-nominated film director, writer, and designer, notable for the quirky and often dark gothic atmosphere in his high-profile films. What makes Tim Burton a hero? Well, for example, have you seen any of his movies such as A Nightmare Before Christmas or The Corpse Bride? If you have, then you will notice the style of animation known as stop motion. Burton was inspired by the genre from Ray Harryhausen's stop motion films. He applied this type of animation into some of his films, but the only exception is he uses clay models. When Burton worked for the Disney Company when it wasn't at the top of its game, Burton offered to make a movie for them. He had pitched the idea before, and it wasn't accepted to be made into a movie, but recent problems had needed Burton to make the actual movie. Burton had written a poem based on the novel The Night Before Christmas by Clark Moore, entitled The Nightmare Before Christmas. When Burton set to make the movie, he hired director Rick Hendricks, who had produced and directed some of Burton's earlier stop-motion animation shorts for shows before the future presentation in movie theaters. Together they collaborated with Danny Elfman, who had also worked with Burton before on previous movies. Elfman wrote the score and music for Nightmare, along with the lyrics. With all of its elements, the claymation, the music, and the intricate plot, the movie was set, and when Disney had received it, the movie brought Disney out of its hole. By using a rare form of animation, Burton had made The Nightmare Before Christmas a success.
Yeah, is that?
Yeah,
oh,
yeah. I mean, it was sort of symbolic to me of how I grew up, where the sort of society feeling quite repressive, and like everything in its place, and everybody put into a category, which is the way I felt sort of growing up. And then the Land of the Dead was sort of symbolically representative of your creative mind, which is much more colorful and much more vibrant, and much more visual stuff going on. So it wasn't meant to be so literal as it was to be sort of that symbol.
When Burton was a child growing up in Burbank, he staged an axe murder with his brother to scare the neighbors, prompting them to call the police. He repeated the prank again with similar results. Tim Burton is always hassled by the critics. It only matters what Burton thinks when it comes to making his movies. Yes, he gets a lot of crap from everybody who doesn't like his goth aesthetic. It's because he has a certain way of adapting novels and other stories, like Charlie and the Chocolate Factory, which is way better than the old one, Sweeney Todd, Sleepy Hollow, Batman, and Big Fish. He didn't want to make Planet of the Apes, but it was still a box office hit, even though it did have bad reviews. It's his style, and that is what people don't seem to get about him. He's different. Let's see the other people who criticize his movies. They won't get very far if they directed a movie. Burton is a hero to the storytelling of movies. A lot of that technique has been lost in filmmaking, but through Burton's movies, it survives.
Burton had written a novel, a collection of original poems that he wrote and illustrated, entitled The Melancholy Death of Oyster Boy. The book features such characters as Stain Boy, the Girl That Stares, and the Boy with Nails in His Eyes. The novel contains 23 tales of tragedy among the freaks that are metaphors for deviance in society. When Tim Burton first started working for Disney, they set him on the project The Fox and the Hound. Later he began work on the movie The Black Cauldron, which was when Disney realized that Tim's art wasn't what they were looking for. That's when they let Burton begin his own projects. This included a poem and artwork which later became known as The Nightmare Before Christmas, the animated short Vincent, and the live-action Frankenweenie. Burton then went on and directed Pee-wee's Big Adventure. After that, he didn't direct another movie for nearly 3 years. Not until he was shown the script for Beetlejuice did he get back into the game. He found that the script was perfect for his unique vision. Warner Brothers then hit him up on directing the big hit of Batman. The movie's box office gross was over $250 million, which is also the highest in the studio's history. The first movie that Tim Burton had complete creative control over was Edward Scissorhands, which was a big hit among moviegoers. It was in fact the first movie Tim Burton finally got recognized for his artistic talent. His first real horror film was Sleepy Hollow starring Johnny Depp, followed by the remake of the sci-fi movie Planet of the Apes. His next project, Big Fish, was said to be one of Burton's most personal and emotional movies in years. In 2005, Burton also recreated the film Charlie and the Chocolate Factory. It was followed 2 months later by the release of The Corpse Bride, which was nominated an Oscar for the Best Animated Feature, but lost to Wallace and Gromit. His most recent film, Sweeney Todd, was released December of '07, where Tim won Best Director and got excellent reviews. Tim Burton still has more movies coming, including a 3D of Alice in Wonderland, Frankenweenie, and The Spook's Apprentice. Some of Tim's earlier movies include Ed Wood and Mars Attacks.
His mother said, "You're not possessed, and you're not almost dead. These games that you play are all in your head. You're not Vincent Price, you're Vincent Malloy. You're not tormented or insane, you're just a young boy. You're 7 years old, and you are my son. I want you to get outside and have some real fun." Her anger now spent, she walked out through the hall. And while Vincent backed slowly against the wall, the room started to sway, to shiver and creak. His horrid insanity had reached its peak. Every horror in his life that had crept through his dreams swept his mad laughter to terrified screams. To escape the madness, he reached for the door, but fell limp and lifeless down on the floor. His voice was soft and very slow as he quoted The Raven from Edgar Allan Poe. "And my soul from out that shadow that lies floating on the floor shall be lifted nevermore."